What is up, guys? My name is Brandon Loomis. I'm one half of the Freshwater Bandits, and today I want to take you through all of my setups, my bass, my catfish setups, my rods, my reels, my line, and what to use certain lines for, what I use them for. Take you through my hooks, my swivels, my weights, and everything that I use in my fishing season. Kind of try to help you out and maybe teach you a thing or two if you didn't already know. So what I'm going to do today, I have all my rods and reels set up right here. You got all of my bass poles right here. You got a panfish or a bobber pole, and I'll explain why I have a bobber pole here in a little bit. And I have my 3 catfish poles right here. I find that you don't need hundreds. You don't need a bunch of fishing poles, rods, and reels. You don't have to have a bunch of this stuff. I find that having usually 3 of each species makes it easier. Obviously 3 catfish, heavier duty, heavier action, and then you have my bass poles, which are lighter action and more flexible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through everything, kind of maybe teach you something and help you guys out. And I'm going to show you what I use in my season. So we're going to start with the bass, and I'm going to go through each and every rod and reel, kind of like the details of it, and hopefully it helps you out. Like I said, we're starting with the bass, then we'll move on to the catfish, and then we'll move on to certain lines of what to use them for. So let's start with the bass. Alright guys, so I got my bass pole set out, and we're going to get to that. I actually have one right now that's brand new, never touched water, and I'm going to go through that a little bit. But right now we have my first one, which is a tried and true. I use it every year. I've been using it the last couple of years, and it's never done me wrong. It's a really nice rod and reel combo. This is the Zebco A-Tac, or Tactical Grip. It is a 6'6" medium heavy action rod. It's a 2-piece, and this is paired with a bait caster from wish.com. And you see I have my line hooked up with the swivel right here. That way, when I get out onto the water, I can choose whatever lure I need. The reason I use this reel is because I was learning how to use a bait caster, and I didn't want to go out and spend a bunch of money for it. I just wanted to get used to it. So I went ahead and picked up this reel off of wish.com, and surprisingly enough, this reel has done amazing. It does your usual bird's nest and stuff, no different than any other bait casting reel. But this is paired with, right here, spider wire 20-pound test moss green braid. I use my braid for my bait casters because it's forgiving. If you do get a bird's nest, it'll be easier to get it out. And if you're lure fishing, I find that your braid is just so much stronger. You're not going to use it for catfishing as much, only because it's not very abrasion resistant. So it's going to scratch, it's going to snap very often if you're using it on the river bottom or dragging it, trolling it behind a boat. But that's my Zebco A-Tac. Moving on is my brand new bait casting combo. It is the Abu Garcia Black Max Next Generation. This is also a 6'6" medium rod. This is a 1-piece rod, and it's also paired, of course, with the Abu Garcia Black Max bait caster. I bought as a combo from Walmart. This is paired also with the Spiderwire 20-pound braid for the exact same reason as this one. Besides obvious reasons, the difference between these for me, the big difference, is I like to retrieve left-handed. This bait caster here is a left-handed retrieve. The Black Max is a right-handed retrieve. If anybody knows bait casters, you can't really switch the handle around like you can on spin casters. So I was skeptical to buy it, but I got it. It feels nice in my hand. It's smooth. Abu Garcia makes an amazing rod and reel combo, especially with the Black Max and especially with the bait casters. Over here, we have the Shakespeare Micro Series rod, and this is paired with a Zebco, the ZSE20 reel. This is a 7-foot light action rod. Right now I also have just a swivel on it because I tie my lure straight to my line. So when I get out on the water, I could just pick and choose whatever lure I want. And then on this reel specifically, I have Zebco Omniflex 10-pound test. You don't need much bigger, especially if you're bass fishing. You don't need much bigger than 10 pounds. 8 pounds even works, but you really don't need bigger than 10-pound test. So with all of my bass poles, except for my bait casters, I do use 20, but it's braid, so it's really thin. And then for my spin caster over here, it is 10-pound test. It's a lighter test. Like I said, you don't really need that heavy test if you're using it for bass. So these are my bass poles right here. I have them all set up. This is the Zebco A-Tacker Advanced Tactical Grip with the Wish.com bait caster. This is the Abu Garcia Black Max with the Black Max Reel combo. And this is the Shakespeare Micro Series with the Zebco ZSE 20. And these are all my bass poles I'm going to use this year. And I will end up doing a video on all of my lures, but not today. Today I just want to talk about my rods and reels and the lines I use and what I use them for. So next we're going to move on from my bass. We're going to go to all the catfish setup that I have, my rods, my reels, my line, and the tackle I use for my catfishing poles. So we're gone from bass. Let's get on to the catfish. So I have my panfish and my catfish pole. Panfish meaning my bobber pole. So I have my bobber pole and my catfish pole set up and ready to go. So just like my spin casting bass pole, I have right here, the first one is another Shakespeare Micro Series with the Zebco ZSE 20 reel. And this has Zebco Omniflex 10-pound test on the reel. Again, you don't need that heavy. It runs up. I got the regular bobber you get anywhere. I have 4 split shots right here. Comes down to a Eagle Claw swivel. Runs down my leader. Now my leader, I'm going to talk a little bit about my leaders. This right here is the Zebco Omniflex 10-pound, and it runs down to a small Eagle Claw hook. I'm going to talk about leaders here more in a minute. This is one of my other catfish poles that I use, and I'm going to explain why it's the exact same as my panfish and bass. But this is another Shakespeare Micro Series with the ZS20 on it. This has, again, 10-pound test, and you don't have to have enormous test on your catfish line as long as your drag's set perfect. So it comes down, these are 4 3/4 ounce egg sinkers coming down to a Eagle Claw swivel. Yes, this line is red, bright red, and there's a reason. It's this stuff right here. Zebco Cajun Smooth Cast Low Vis Raging Red 17-pound test for my leader. I use this kind of to indicate my leaders so I can find them easier. And on top of that, it's a 17-pound test, so it's not big, it's not small. But then you come down here. This is a, I want to say it's a laser cut circle hook. Usually I use the Team Catfish circle hooks, but these were the first things I grabbed out of my tackle box. So that's what I'm using this year. Until I need to replace the hook is the laser cuts. You move on to my bigger, heavier rods, which I have 2 of them here. You have my lighter rods here, and you got these 2 here. This is the Bass Pro Shops Cat Buster. This is a 7-foot, 7-foot heavy, medium heavy action rod. This is paired with the Optics 60 from Quantum or Shakespeare. This is 20-pound Zebco Omniflex monofilament, and this runs up to my weights, which is a 3/4 an ounce and then a 3/4 ounce egg sinker. My Eagle Claw swivel, and this runs down to a 50-pound spider wire braided leader, which comes down to another. I want to say they're 5/0 laser cut circle hook. And I'm going to explain kind of why I use braid for leader. But for right now, you have my brand new, I think it's touched water once. Excuse me. This is a Berkeley 8-foot medium heavy action rod. And it's the exact same setup as my Cat Buster. So it comes up. There's a 3/4 ounce egg sinker, an ounce, 3/4 swivel, 50-pound leader, and I think it's a 5/0 laser cut circle hook. Here's the spider wire 50-pound braid that I use for my leaders. So you have, and this is also has these 20-pound Zebco Omniflex on it. And the reason being is 20 pound, they're big reels. They're made to have 20-pound test on them. And then over here, these reels are a little bit smaller, so I do keep the 10-pound Omniflex. But that doesn't mean you can't hook into a decent size fish with these. And I'll explain why I'm not too concerned about the 10-pound because of the drag. And I'm going to show you guys how I set up my drag. But you have the 17-pound Cajun leader over here with the 10-pound Omniflex on both of these reels. Then you have 20-pound Zebco Omniflex monofilament on both of these reels with the 50-pound leader over here. And the reason why I use a 50-pound braided leader and why I will never switch my catfish leaders is because last year we went out to the river, both of us. I had a bite and I was sitting there. I started reeling it in. It started getting heavier. Ended up I had hooked into a decent sized gar. Put it in right now. But I hooked into a decent sized gar and the hook was nowhere in its mouth. The leader had wrapped around his top jaw and he had closed his mouth tight, and I ended up getting him in just by the leader. And yes, I did say braid is it's not very abrasion resistant, but because it was between his teeth and he had his jaw clamped, I ended up getting him in anyway without having the hook anywhere near his mouth. So that kind of is the reason why I'm going to stick with my 50-pound. It's strong. It's been a great leader. And then on top of that, of course, the monofilament. I don't have anything bad to say about it, but I'm not going to switch on my heavier catfish rods. The reason I have monofilament on my lighter catfish rod is mostly because of, like I said, I use that leader for a lot of things, or that line for a lot of leaders, and basically, you don't need to have every single line rigged up the same. You can rig up any line you want for any reason. Let me come back to the bobber pole. So this is what people usually start out with if they're just now fishing, or if they're kids. They usually start out with a bobber pole. The reason being they call them panfish poles is bluegill, small things like that. Smaller hooks, bobber pole, top water, you're going to hook into something, regardless of what it is. There's been a lot of bass that hits bobber poles. I'm not saying the species is limited, but usually bluegill or any kind of sunfish usually hit on those bobber poles. Now, we have caught catfish and bass both on bobber poles, and bobber poles are also good to catch gar. They're also top water feeders. So if you want to hook into a multi-species, you never know what you're going to catch. And it's a little bit of fun because you get to watch the bobber go up and down, go back kind of to how everybody started fishing. I think a bobber pole is great. I mean, I've been fishing for a long time now, and I will never go anywhere without my bobber pole. So right now, these are obviously my panfish bobber pole. These are my catfish poles that I'm using this year. Next, I'm going to talk about why I use my circle hooks, why I use my line that I use, and why I use the weights and swivels that I use. So let's get on to that. Alright guys, so now let's talk about my line, my circle hooks, my weights, and now my swivels. So we're going to start off up here with the line. Up here we have, starting from left to right, this is my spider wire easy braid 50-pound moss green. I use spider wire for my 50-pound for my leaders. I had already said that in my when I was going over my catfish poles. I use 50-pound for my leaders only because you don't need much more than that on a bait caster, on a spin caster. So 50-pound leader, that's just fine. But you move over here to my same exact thing, easy braid spider wire, but except for this is 20-pound test. I use this for my bait casters and of course for some other ins and outs, but mostly for my bait casting reels. It's a thin, strong line that I use for my bass poles. You come over, you have the 20-pound Zebco Omniflex. I use 20 and 10-pound Omniflex. And the reason being is I've never, ever, ever had a reason not to use Zebco's line. It's cheap. You get them at Walmart. You can get a bunch of it. it never fails, ever. 10-pound, my 20-pound I use for my bigger reels, for my catfish reels. The 10-pound I use for my smaller reels. Neither one of these I use for a leader. The only other wire I use for a leader is right here. This is, again, Zebco Cajun, Smooth Cast, Low Vis, Raging Red. This is a 17-pound. Now, again, I trust Zebco brand just because of they make an amazing quality of line, rods, reels, everything. The 17-pound test is because it has some strength to it, but at the same time, it is not as thick as the Zebco 20-pound test. And it's bright red, so you can be able to find your leaders in your tackle box really easy. So these are all 5 of my lines that I use and the reasons that I use them. And yes, I have used other line in the past. I just find that this setup right here is the best for what I use it for. So moving on now, we come down here, and these right here, these are the laser cut circle hooks that I was talking about. These are our Team Catfish circle hooks. And the reason we use circle hooks is because I don't know if you can see, yes, the end right there is facing back into itself, which makes it easier hookup ratio and easier for the catfish not to get off. So we use these are 5/0. We did just pick up 8 and 12/0 circle hooks. You can get these at Walmart as well. They're not that expensive, but this is all we use for our catfishing. Moving on, we come over here. This is our 3/4 ounce egg sinkers, and I use my egg sinkers only because of practicality. They're easy to grab, they're cheap, you can get a bunch of them at Walmart, and they're a great matchup with our 1 ounce egg sinkers. These are a lot bigger than our 3/4 ounce, obviously, but we like to team these up. So we will string them, as you've seen in the catfish part. We string them 3/4, 1 ounce, 3/4, and we let those slide up and down the line freely. Then we come over here to the last part, which is our Eagle Claw swivels. You don't have to use Eagle Claw, and these are their new design. They just never fail us. If we use it and it's nothing's going wrong with it, then we're not going to change it. So these are our Eagle Claws. Obviously, we trust this brand a lot. They never fail. They're an amazing swivel. They're cheap. You can get a bunch of them anywhere you go, honestly. But this is our tackle setup that we have. We have all of our lines right here. We have our circle hooks here, 3/4 ounce egg sinkers, our 1 ounce egg sinkers, and then our Eagle Claw swivels. And now that's going through all of our tackle and the lines and why we use what lines we use and why we use what hooks we use. So now we're going to move on, and that's it, guys. So we talked about my rod, my reels, my lines, my weights, my swivels, and my hooks. There is one other thing I forgot to talk to you guys about, which I'm about to talk to you about right now. That is the drag. Drag for me is the most important thing that you need to know about when you're trying to hook into decent sized catfish, decent sized any fish, honestly. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use my bigger catfish rod right here. This is the Berkeley 8-foot. So when it comes to your drag, you have a drag knob here, and some reels you have a drag knob here. So when I set my drag, you should be able to pull it out with some resistance. You see how I'm able to pull it out like this. If you are not able to pull it at all, if you can't, you're pulling and pulling and pulling and nothing's happening, you need to dial that drag back just a little bit until you're able to pull it out. Or if you're able to just pull it out as easy as possible, then you need to tighten that up a little bit. It is right to tighten it, left to loosen it. All of my reels that I own have the drag on top except for my bait casters, which are on the sides. Everybody knows that. So if your drag is set properly or kind of like this, then it doesn't matter what size your rod or reel is. You're going to be able to bring in and land a lot more fish and decent sized fish. So that's about the drag. So now I know that I've gone over everything that I need to. In the next video, we're going to talk about that and that, which is my lure bag and my tackle box for catfish. But until then, I hope you guys are staying safe, you guys are staying healthy, you guys are staying happy. And never forget to keep cranking.